Good morning to all my friends and family, and welcome to this episode of Jim's 5am Club. What I'd love to do this morning is go on a walk and talk and have a chat to you about a book, and the book that I've selected for today's discussion is entitled The Promise That Changes Everything. A book that was published on the 29th of October 2020, back in the days of COVID, by an author named Nancy Kline. Nancy Kline's book, The Promise That Changes Everything, is indeed a profound exploration of the power of listening and the transformative impact of uninterrupted thinking. In a world that often values speaking over listening, Kline's book offers a refreshing perspective on how committing to non-interrupting can improve relationships, foster creativity, and deepen understanding. I must admit, one of the challenges that I face is that I do interrupt quite regularly, and it's something that I guess, having read this book, is something that I'm going to check and to be a lot more conscious of in order to try and help me in my interactions with family, friends, workplaces, and that's what the whole goal is: to live, learn and pass it on, and to try and modify our behaviours, to improve our behaviours so that we can be better citizens. So the first key message to come from this book is where the author reminds us that the art of listening is indeed a gift. Nancy Kline reminds us that listening is one of the greatest gifts we can offer someone, including our wives, our children, our grandchildren, family, and our work peers. By promising not to interrupt, we can create a safe space for others to express themselves fully. True listening is not passive, it's an active, intentional act of honouring someone's voice and their thoughts. The other message that comes from this author is where we look at the thinking environment. This book introduces the concept of a thinking environment, a space where individuals feel free to think deeply and authentically. Kline explains that when we refrain from interrupting and instead offer our full attention, we enable others to access their best thinking and creativity as well. We look at the power of silence. Silence isn't uncomfortable and shouldn't be uncomfortable. It's powerful. Kline emphasizes that allowing silences in conversations can encourage deeper reflection and more thoughtful responses. By resisting the urge to fill silence, we give others the room to explore their thoughts and feelings more fully. Because at the end of the day, what we need to realize is that interruptions are not just annoying, they can stifle creativity and innovation. Kline argues that when we cut someone off, we are actually disrupting their train of thought and diminishing their confidence in their own ideas. The book challenges us to break this habit and prioritize uninterrupted thinking. The author also mentions that attention is transformative. One of the most profound lessons is that attention, when given wholly and without distraction, has the power to heal, connect, and inspire. Kline explains that when we truly focus on someone, they actually feel valued and empowered. This kind of attention can transform relationships and foster trust. But another key message that comes from this author is that listening requires humility. Listening without interrupting requires humility. It means setting aside our own needs to speak, our own needs to advise, our own needs to fix, and to prioritize the other person's thoughts. Kline encourages us to embrace this humility and to recognize that our role is to hold space, not to dominate space, and not to dominate the conversation. We need to also consider questions that actually spark thinking. Kline introduces the idea of asking open-ended questions, generative questions that encourage deeper thinking. Instead of giving advice or steering the conversation, we can ask questions like, what more do you think about this? These questions invite exploration and allow people to find their own solutions. The other key message that comes from this author is that interrupting is a system of ego. When we interrupt, it often stems from a need to assert ourselves, prove a point, or control the conversation. Kline urges us to examine our motives and recognize how interrupting reflects our ego. By letting go of this need, we create a more collaborative and respectful dynamic. There is a ripple effect that comes from listening. Kline beautifully illustrates how the promise to not interrupt has a ripple effect. When we listen deeply, others feel heard and valued, which inspires them to listen more attentively in return, which also creates a culture of respect and understanding that extends far beyond individual conversations. And the last key message to come from this book is where we look at the fact that listening changes lives. At its core, the book reveals that listening is more than a skill, it's a way of being. By committing to not interrupting, we transform not only our relationships, but also ourselves. We become more present, more pleasant, more empathetic and connected. And Kline shows us that this simple promise has the power, the great power, to change lives, starting with our own.